Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for tuning in this afternoon. My name is Katie Peace. I'm the Director of Communications for the Preservation League of New York State, and we're very excited to welcome you to today's author talk with John Lazzaro, all about his work and his book of Vanishing New York. I also want to say thank you to our sponsors for this program, the Peggy Ann and Roger G. Gary Charitable Trust. They underwrite all of our preservation book club programming. If you found your way to this webinar but are not familiar with the Preservation League, we are a New York statewide nonprofit focused on historic preservation. We empower all New Yorkers to use historic preservation to enrich their communities, protect their heritage, and build a sustainable future. We do that in many different ways. We provide grants that jumpstart preservation projects. We advocate for preservation at the local, state, and national level. We provide technical assistance, collaborate with colleagues across the state, award excellence in historic preservation. We draw attention to at-risk historic sites through our 7 to Save program, and we offer lots of virtual programs like the one that you are tuning in for today. And so the reason that we are here today, Vanishing New York, Ruins Across the Empire State. This book was published in 2022. It explores over 40 of the most evocative abandoned sites in New York and puts their individual stories in the larger context of the state's historical legacy. Photographer and author John Lazzaro traveled the state over a 3-year period, capturing what's left of such places before they're swept away by time. Divided by region, these sites ranging from the Catskills, once vibrant vacation destinations, to Long Island's melancholy psychiatric centers, reveal deeper social, cultural, and political changes that lead to their decay. These abandoned hospitals, schools, churches, railways, and estates offer us a view into a past rapidly dissolving before it disappears completely. A little bit about John. So he specializes in urban landscape photography and the documentation of the solemn beauty in abandoned buildings and vanishing architecture throughout New York State. As an author, photographer, and documentary filmmaker, he's fascinated by history, storytelling, and social awareness. His first book, The Walls Still Talk, A Photographic Journey Through Kings Park Psychiatric Center, was released in 2019. It documented the decades of neglect and decay of Kings Park Psychiatric Center in Kings Park, New York, which is on Long Island, as a result of deinstitutionalization. Lazzaro draws upon his experiences from documentary filmmaking in order to create a realistic, visual, and thought-provoking dialogue of the macabre. And you can find lots more of his work and photography at johnlazzaro.photo.com. And with that, I'm going to kick things over to John to give us his presentation. I will come back at the end to help facilitate the Q&A, and I hope you all enjoy.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you, Katie, for that introduction. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. All right, great. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Really excited to present A Vanishing New York to you all. My name is John Lazzaro. I'm a photographer and author from Huntington, New York, which is on the North Shore of Long Island. And I'm here to talk about A Vanishing New York, Ruins Across the Empire State, which is my second book. And I've been a photographer for close to 10 years now, but I only got into shooting this subject matter within the past 6 years, and that is documenting historical ruins and abandonments all across the US. So for me, it started back in 2018 when I started doing this passion project called The Walls Still Talk, A Photographic Journey Through Kings Park Psychiatric Center. So the remains of Kings Park Psychiatric Center are about 15 to 20 minutes away from where I live on the North Shore, and they're situated in Nissaquag River State Park, which is in the town of Kings Park. So it's a state park where you're able to walk around and enjoy the grounds amidst the former ruins of one of New York's largest state hospitals. So when I embarked on this project back in 2018, I wanted to show the effects of deinstitutionalization, which is the massive closing of hospitals all across the US. Since I finished that project in 2019, I sort of wanted to branch out, travel more and more upstate, and do the type of photography, and that's where I came up with the idea to do A Vanishing New York. So from inception to completion, this project took about 3 years to do. So from 2019 to 2022. I won't go through all 43 locations that I visited for this book, but I'll pick a few from each of New York's 11 different regions. I'll show you some photos, talk about the history in brief, and certainly please ask me questions at the end if you want me to elaborate on anything or talk about my approach to photography. I'm always excited to share stories from my journeys. But New York State is divided into 11 different regions. So this is just a map just to kind of show how those regions are divided. And each region of New York State has a significance to the overall infrastructural history of the state based on their abandoned ruins. So if you look at Long Island, for example, it was once considered the mental health capital of the world because it had three of the world's largest state hospitals. So you have Pilgrim State, which actually holds the world record as being one of the largest hospitals in the world, Kings Park, which I just talked about, and Central Islip. If you look at the Catskill region here, you see a lot of remnants of the vacation industry there. If you look at the Finger Lakes region, you see a lot of remnants of the railroad industry and how that was rendered obsolete by the induction of the interstate highway system. Okay, so with that, I'll go into the presentation. I'll start with the Long Island region, which is where I'm from. And the first place I'll talk about is Kings Park Psychiatric Center. So this photo is of Building 93, which used to be the geriatric infirmary on the hospital. It was designed by New York State architect William Haggard, and he's known for building the Alfred E. Smith building, which is situated in Albany, and more famously, Attica State Prison. So Kings Park was in operation from 1885 until 1996. So its history spans 111 years, and it opened as a branch of the Kings County Lunatic Asylum in Flatbush. So the town of Kings Park is named after Brooklyn, not the hospital, because Brooklyn is considered Kings County. So this is a rear of Building 93 looking east. And this is an archival photo of the front of Building 93, sort of facing northwest. And just off the screen to the left is the Long Island Sound, just to give you a little geographical perspective of where we are. So still in Kings Park, this is another one of my favorite photos, one of the early photos I shot for the Wall Still Talk, but which is also in this book. This is the interior of Building 90, which is a Macy home. And basically, this was just a basic clerical building, part of the hospital. It contained a business office. The hospital director had an office there. Payroll offices, the chaplain's offices were located in this building. For me, this is one of my favorite shots because I just like how there's some asymmetry here. You sort of have some graffiti street art balancing out the stairwell here. And when I photograph places like this, I like to think in terms of geometry as far as shot composition. So I like to pick a focal point, such as the end of a room or the end of a long hallway, make that my center, and then sort of balance it out either symmetrically or asymmetrically. In this case, I like how the street art is sort of prominent in this shot. Next photo with Kings Park. This is from the interior of Building 22, and this is a day room. So Building 22 at Kings Park, it served as an admissions ward. So if you're a patient being admitted there, chances are you were housed there for a period of 20 to 30 days. You were assessed based on what your needs were before being moved to a different part of the hospital. So this photo was taken on the 4th floor of Building 22, and it's the only floor with barred windows. And that's because the most violent patients were housed on the upper floor. In fact, there was a particular ward for patients who were in the custody of the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department. And last photo from Kings Park that I'll show you. This is a breezeway corridor. So it's basically just a long hallway connecting 2 or more buildings together. So it's connecting buildings 21 and 22 to building 7, which is at the end of the hallway. Building 7 served as a medical surgical facility. So this is what basically 25 years or so of vandalism, natural decay look like. You can see all the graffiti, but I'll draw your attention just to the windows here, and you see some green light coming through. That's actually not graffiti, that's just plants and ivy growing outside. So I happen to capture the sunlight coming in at just the right time. One of my favorite photos from the set at Kings Park. Okay, so next spot on the Long Island region, this is the Fairchild Republic factory. And basically this factory produced fighter jets. So during World War II, they produced over 9,000 P-47 Thunderbolt fighters, which were very instrumental in the European theater. They made the F-84 Thunderjets for Korea, and then the 105 Thunderchiefs for the Vietnam conflict. So manufacturing ended at the factory in 1987 after a decline in building contracts. So all the archival records were destroyed prior to its closing, except for a single purchase order for a block of P-47s, which was found after it closed. So that document actually sits in the Cradle of Aviation Museum in Garden City on Long Island. So this was the main workroom here. This is an archival photo of what that room would have looked like back when it was operational, perceivably during the Vietnam conflict, just based on what's pictured here. Okay, next spot on Long Island. This is Camp Hero, which is out in Montauk. So this radar tower at Camp Hero was once a mother station to a network of smaller radio towers situated all over the East Coast. And it was said that this collection of radar towers afforded the US an extra 30 minutes warning time in the event of a nuclear attack. And I have to mention, I don't personally like conspiracy theories, but if you're familiar with the show Stranger Things, it was actually inspired by by Camp Hero, because of the theory of the Montauk Project. And the theory behind the Montauk Project is that legend has it that experiments took place beneath the radar tower in secret laboratories connected by an elaborate tunnel system, and a lot of mind control experiments, things like that. So that's sort of loosely inspired the show Stranger Things, and that's how it relates to Camp Hero. But the radar tower is still there. Camp Hero is a state park, so you're free to roam around the grounds. There's camping there. That picture in the lower right-hand corner is a historical photo of what Camp Hero looked like back when it was active, courtesy of the Montauk Historical Society. All right, and last stop at the Long Island region. This is the Nepegue Stilt House, and Nepegue is right next to Amagansett on the South Fork of Long Island. So if you're going out towards Montauk, just past the Hamptons, this is one of the stops there. And this home, it was abandoned in 1998 as per town order, stating that due to a non-functional septic system, the residents could no longer be occupied. So originally, when this home was built in the 1950s, it sat 100 feet from the water as part of a small fishing community. When I took this photo in the winter of 2020, it was about 30 feet in the Nepegue Bay. All right, going into the New York City region. This is Skull Silo, and this building was originally part of the Greenpoint Terminal Market, which played an important part in American industrial history at the turn of the century. The market buildings dated back to 1890 and were built by the American Manufacturing Company, which happened to be the largest rope manufacturer in the United States. So Skull Silo got its name from an incident that happened in the early morning hours of May 2nd, 2006. And amidst the abandoned buildings at the Greenpoint Terminal Market, a mysterious 10-alarm fire broke out. So it took about 400 firefighters, about a day and a half, and 9 million gallons of water to fully extinguish the blaze. It was actually one of the most extensive operations by the FDNY since 9/11. So after that fire, this was the only structure left standing. And the two eye sockets here in the street art, it's just missing concrete from the fire. So a street artist painted the skull around it, hence how it got its name, Skull Silo. So this is one of the earlier photos I took doing this book project. Next stop in New York City region, this is Seaview Hospital. And it was built at the turn of the century as a tuberculosis hospital. So during the 1940s, Seaview Hospital was running at full capacity and treating bone and glandular tuberculosis, which is not often treated at other hospitals. Many of the doctors serving at Seaview pioneered surgical procedures such as lung collapse, which permitted the self-sealing of tuberculosis lesions, and went on to receive national reputations in the field of chest surgery. So a lot of the pioneering research that was done to treat tuberculosis was actually undertaken at Seaview Hospital. Now, the cure, streptomycin, was developed by Dr. Selman Waxman at Rutgers University. But a lot of the research that was done at Seaview Hospital, experiments with something called isoniazids, were undertaken at Seaview, actually made that antibiotic more effective, treating patients that weren't responding to the antibiotics. So this was a patient porch where patients would spend a lot of time getting access to sunlight and fresh air, because before antibiotics were invented, access to fresh air and sunlight were believed to help cure tuberculosis. And I just want to draw your attention to this photo. If you look at the walls here, there's some tiling, and you see some turquoise objects here. This is a close-up shot of it. This is actually a mosaic frieze that was part of the architecture, and you kind of see this on the upper floors all throughout the hospital. And it was believed that images like this would kind of help aid the healing process for patients at the hospital. Still at Seaview, there was actually a lot of old equipment left behind, dating back to the 30s and 40s. So this is just an old bed with a crutch and a lamp that I found. Another thing to note is, for me, I don't stage shots. I like to shoot things as is, as I see it. So this was probably set up by someone before me. I just want to make that clear. This is just another photo of Seaview Hospital. At the end of the hallway, it might be a little hard to make out, but these are actually wooden wheelchairs. So you can actually kind of see how far back in time this hospital goes. Okay, next stop is the Hudson Valley region. And you see a lot of remnants of institutions and estates here. So the first stop that I'll talk about is Camp LaGuardia. So the history of Camp LaGuardia dates back to 1918. And Camp LaGuardia is located in Chester, New York. So it's right next to Goshen, just to give you an idea of where it's located. So it goes back to 1918, when New York State purchased 300 acres of land in the town of Chester, Orange County, to build a prison for young women following a sharp spike in female criminal activity in New York City during and after World War I. In 1934, Great Court Women's Prison was converted into Camp Great Court, which is a work camp for homeless men by then New York City Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia. It was renamed Camp LaGuardia in 1935, and the facility was imagined to be self-sustaining by providing a rehabilitative work environment. And then it closed in 2006 when funds were reallocated to city efforts. So this is just an aerial shot of the front entrance of Camp LaGuardia. This is just a typical corridor where the residents lived. You can kind of see there's some remnants of back when it was served as a prison. This used to be the dining hall at Camp LaGuardia. And this is just a typical office corridor in the front portion of the building. So that's just all years, decades upon decades of just peeling paint. I just like the natural colors in this shot. Okay, next stop is Letchworth Village, otherwise known as the Letchworth Village Rehabilitation Center, and this is located in Thiels, New York. And basically what this facility did is that it helped treat children who are mentally and physically disabled. So at the time of Letchworth Village's opening in 1911, patients were categorized into one of three categories of feeble-mindedness: idiot, imbecile, and moron. And those were common and acceptable terms for patients back during that period of history. So despite these distinctions, they were acceptable terms in the mental health field. And but despite that, Letchworth sought to change the way mentally and physically disabled patients were treated. So the property was picked in the rolling hills of Rockland County as a stark change from the institutional setting. And come the 1970s, it sort of got more national prominence from the Rivera report that he did on the Willowbrook State School and the conditions there. So if you actually look back at that report, Letchworth Village was the other facility that was named just because of the severe overcrowding, the underfunding, and how patients were treated during that time. So this event sort of started the process of deinstitutionalization, which was the closing of hospitals all across the country. So these are just a few photos from inside Letchworth Village. This was an office, I believe. You can see some paperwork left over. This was taken inside the former medical surgical building, which was this structure right here. This was taken inside the former boys' dormitory. This was the morgue in the basement of the medical surgical facility. Okay, next stop, this is the Brandywine Estate. And this is in Westchester County. This estate, it was built in 1909. It was a 49-room Tudor-style mansion. It belonged to a prominent railroad businessman. After his death in 1927, the estate went through several owners and a massive renovation before it was converted into a nursing home. And that closed sometime in the late 1990s, early 2000s for a more modern facility. So this picture was a day room or served as a day room at one point. And that baby grand piano happened to be left over from the time that it was open. And I just want to draw your attention just to the beautiful woodwork on the ceiling here. That photo on the lower right-hand corner, that is the back entrance to um, the Brandywine Estate. This was a typical room where one of the residents lived. You can see there's some items left over. It's a unique room that I found in attic storage. This is just a bunch of lamps, lampshades, moved presumably after it closed. And second to last stop in Hudson Valley, this is Bennett College, which is located in Millbrook. And this particular structure was Halcyon Hall, and it was once a resort hotel, which was built in 1890. Then in 1907, Miss Bennett's Finishing School for Girls of Irvington purchased the property. The school would reinvent itself into Bennett College, which is a 2-year college for women offering fashion design, art, music, modern language, history, dance. When coeducation got popular in the 1960s and 70s, Bennett College faced retention and enrollment issues before closing in 1978. And then last but not least, for Hudson Valley, this is David Abercrombie's Elda estate. So David Abercrombie, the founder of Abercrombie and Fitch, this was the estate that he helped construct in 1927. And this is what is left over today. So after he left the company, he resided here with his wife and 4 children, and that's how the estate got its name, Elda. Elda is an acronym for each of his 4 children, Elizabeth, Lucy, David, and Abbott. So this is inside the estate. As you can see, it's been severely vandalized over the years. The photo on the lower right-hand corner, that is what this room would have looked like back when Abercrombie lived there. Same room, just opposite ends. You can actually see in both photos the floor tiling is still the same, which is pretty neat. Okay, heading to the Catskill region. One of my favorite places that I visit. This is the Nevele Grand Resort. And this resort, if you've seen the movie Dirty Dancing, this resort was or this resort sort of inspired the resort Kellerman's, which is featured in the movie. So, the Catskill region was a very popular resort destination, back in the 60s and 70s, and it was part of the Borscht Belt. I know there was a previous talk that Marissa Scheinfeld did on resorts of that area, which is very interesting. So I highly recommend checking that out. It goes into this area a little more in depth. But the Nevele Grand Resort dates back to the early 19th century. According to local lore, 11 school teachers discovered Nevele Falls, which is a hidden waterfall on the property, thus inspiring the name Nevele, which is the word 11 spelled backwards. So it opened as a resort in 1903, and then it closed in 2008. So over the decades, when the Catskills declined as a vacation destination, airfare got less expensive during the 70s and 80s. So less and less people were traveling to the Catskills for vacation. So you see a lot of these resorts, such as the Nevele, they closed, just facing a lot of financial difficulties. So this image on the left, this is Nevele Tower, which is the main hotel. This structure here, this was the former ski and skate chalet. So this was an ice rink here, and this red tubing was the mechanism that sort of kept the ice cold while being outdoors. So inside the ski and skate chalet at the Nevele, these are just some former rentals, skate rentals and ski rentals that I found. This image here on the right, if you look at the floor, there's all this paperwork left over. These are actually old rental agreement forms that I found. So I just want you to think that if you were to rent a pair of skis and you had to sign out an agreement form, think about the information that you would put on that. So like your name, your address, your phone number, credit card information, social security number. So a lot of that was just left behind, and it's really interesting to see what people what is left behind when something is forced to close. In many cases, due to unforeseen circumstances. Yeah, it's pretty crazy to think about. This was the Stardust Room, which is the main entertainment theater at the Nevele. That image on the lower right-hand corner, that's an image of what it looked like back when it was active sometime during in the 1950s. Okay, next stop in the Catskills. This is the Catskill Game Farm, and chances are you probably visited this zoo at some point. I did back when I was a child. It was one of my favorite places to go as a kid when I was vacationing in this area. It was also the first privately owned zoo in the United States, and it was founded in 1933. And it closed in 2006, sort of following the same financial difficulties that a lot of the resorts did in that area. So this image is a former souvenir shop. Okay, going into the central New York region. This is the Mahasko Powerhouse. So the story behind this is that water, and this is located in Amsterdam, New York. Water from the Chuctanunda Creek was filtered at the Mahasko Powerhouse for use in the conversion to steam. So the steam from the powerhouse's boilers powered its turbine generators, which in turn produced electricity for many of Amsterdam's mills. Like many industries served in Amsterdam, the steam efficiencies produced at Mahasko helped grow Mohawk carpets into a world leader in carpet making. So, some interior shots of the main boiler room. This spiral staircase here, this is the top of that photo on the left, so that's shooting down. And this is the Charleston USA Outlet Mall located in Utica. It was constructed, or it opened rather, in 1982. The complex stretched across 30 acres and contained over 50 stores, 2 restaurants, and an off-track betting parlor, and operated until about 1991. So I had planned to photograph the interior of this place during the project, but when I got there, it actually suffered a massive, before I got there, it suffered a massive fire in August of 2020. So bad that the city of Utica declared a state of emergency out of concern of the weather and wind patterns carrying ash and asbestos particles throughout the city. So it's still something I wanted to include for the book just because it sort of varies from the normal, like the institutions I visited, the hospitals that I visited. But yeah, it just kind of shows that a lot of these places do suffer, unforeseen events, and that's why it's important to document the history of such places. So going into the capital regions of New York, so we have Albany, we have the cities of Albany, Troy here. The first place I'll talk about is Saratoga County Homestead, and like Seaview Hospital, this was a former tuberculosis hospital that opened in 1914 and operated until 1960 when it was converted into a geriatric infirmary. That operated as that in that capacity for a number of years before finally closing. And you can actually see it still has the words Saratoga County Homestead here just under the main entrance. If you were to go through the main entrance, this is the first thing that you would see. This is the main stairwell that would take you to the upper and lower levels. This is one of my favorite shots that I took for this book. And it's actually very well lit because the ceiling in this shot is actually located on the stairs. So this is all natural sunlight that is just sort of permeating down. Okay, and this is in Albany. This is the Central Warehouse. It's an 11-story, 508,000 square foot structure that served as a refrigerated food storage facility. And its steel and concrete design, insulated with cork and cooled with ammonia, was capable of storing enough food to feed all of Albany for several months. This is one of the interior floors. You see just some random storage left over. Going into the Adirondack region, you see a lot of remnants of the iron mining industry here. So this is Tahaw's Upper Works, located in the small town of Newcomb. And basically, it was just a mining village situated at the base of Mount Marcy, and it dates back to 1826. These were cottages that miners lived in with their families while they participated in mining operations nearby. This is one of the remnants of one of the cottages on the left. This structure here, this was the McIntyre blast furnace, and its purpose was to filter out impurities while mining the iron ore. Okay, still in the Adirondack region, this is the Lorraine W. Bills Elementary School, and this photo is actually the cover of the book. The L.W. Bills School is one of two schools in the Herkimer Central School District, and it closed in 1991 after the opening of a newer facility. One of my favorite places that I visited for the book, just because there was just a lot of things left over that were very photogenic. This was just one of the classrooms. You could see all these textbooks, encyclopedias, National Geographics that were left over. This was the main gymnasium auditorium in the school. Okay, last stop in the Adirondack region. This is the Mary McClellan Hospital, which is located in the town of Cambridge. So it's about 40 minutes outside of Troy. And basically, it just served as a small rural hospital for the local community. Inside, this is one of the first photos that I took while visiting this place. This was a medical library that I found. Bunch of books left over. These were all like nursing journals, yearbooks, Reader's Digest books, more or less still left intact. This was the nursing dormitory on the grounds. Florence Nightingale Hall was the name of the building. And you can see visiting a lot of these places, you encounter a lot of structural instability here. So I remember when I took this shot, I was solo, I was by myself, and I had to be very careful about, how I set up my tripod and where I went, in taking these shots. Okay, going up to the Thousand Island Seaway region, you see a lot of remnants of paper mills in this area of New York. So one such place that I visited was the Newton Falls Fine Paper Company. So the story behind this place is that in the Western Adirondacks, pulp and paper mills were built on riversides, which provided power and transportation for floating lumber. By 1925, there were over 800 residents living in the town of Newton Falls. Many were immigrants who traveled from Canada, Poland, Denmark, Finland, Russia, and Norway. And even though Newton Falls paper was profitable, the mill owner, which was Appleton Coated of Kimberly, Wisconsin, announced in October of 1999 that it was laying off half of its workforce at Newton Falls. So it forced essentially the town to close. And a lot of residents had to move to Canton and Saranac Lake to find stable work. So this shot, this is one of the processing floors. It's a reflection shot because I'm actually standing in about an inch of water when I took this shot. And it's a long exposure shot taken over the course of, I think, 15 to 20 seconds. Yeah, it's one of my favorite shots in this set from Newton Falls. This was another processing floor. You can see that in this area here, in the center, if you can see my mouse, there used to be huge generators here, which would power the different equipment. There's a control room off to the left over here on this side. One can only imagine how loud this room must have been during its peak operation. This is just a typical office room in the paper mill. This room I found, this had all the blueprints of the entire facility. which is pretty interesting to stumble across. Okay, next stop in New York is the Finger Lakes region. Like I mentioned, you see a lot of remnants of the railroad industry here. So the first stop I'll talk about here is the Lehigh Valley Railroad Manchester Roundhouse. This is located in the town of Manchester, which is about half an hour east of Rochester, just to give you an idea where it's located. So the story behind the roundhouse is as diesel locomotives came into regular use, the Lehigh Valley Railroad constructed the Manchester Roundhouse in 1916 with the purpose of providing fuel and maintenance for freight cars and locomotives. Um, when by the 1970s, industrial and commercial development was no longer concentrated in central locations, but dispersed regionally, the interstate highway system allowed for the flexibility of trucking to bring cargo to more dispersed locations. So roundhouses, which served essentially like how airline hubs operate today, were essentially rendered obsolete. So we see a lot of closures of roundhouses all across the country due to the highway system. So this is an interior shot of the roundhouse. This sort of depicts the different freight car bays. The rails rather were taken out long after it closed. Okay, going into the city of Rochester, this is the Rochester Industrial and Rapid Transit Railway. So what a lot of people don't know is that the city of Rochester actually had a subway at one point. The story behind this place is that it opened to the public in December of 1927. So ridership peaked during World War II due to gasoline rationing, but declined by the 1950s as plans were developed for a system of expressways in and around Rochester. When I-490 was completed, passenger service on the Rochester subway ended on June 30th, 1956. So it only operated for about 30 years or so. And something also interesting to note is that when city planners were planning out the construction of a subway in Rochester, it took place, they started doing so at the turn of the century. And the planning process took so long that city planners didn't factor in how popular the automobile would be. And by the time the subway opens, many people living in Rochester owned a car. So they didn't take the subway that often. And that's just an interesting industrial fact that I researched while doing this book. This is an interior of the subway. So same shot. This is just inside the bridge here. Last stop at the Finger Lakes region. This is Jackson Sanatorium. Now, sanatoriums are known as tuberculosis hospitals. In this case, this was not a tuberculosis hospital. This was a health resort. And it's located in the city of Dansville, which is just outside of Ithaca. The story of Jackson Sanatorium begins in 1854 when Dr. Caleb Jackson opened the institute as Our Home on the Hillside. During a time when hydrotherapy was popular, and basically that's a practice of using water treatment to cure such ailments as anxiety and depression. Dr. Jackson also encouraged his patients to follow a strict diet, emphasizing fruits, vegetables, and unprocessed grains. So his concoction of twice-baked gram flour, which had to be soaked in water overnight, later became what we now know as granola. So granola cereal was actually invented here at Jackson Sanatorium. And this resort operated until Labor Day 1971. Second to last region is the Chautauqua-Allegheny region. This is J.N. Adam Memorial Hospital. This hospital actually opened up as a tuberculosis hospital and operated until 1960 when it was reformatted to treat the developmentally disabled until 1993. One of the more spacious places that I visited, there was a lot to photograph here. I just want to draw your attention to this tree in the center of the photo right here. Behind it, it's a little hard to make out, but there's a dome part of the structure. This is what that looks like inside. This beautiful stained glass was actually part of the dining hall in the hospital. And this, just because of the ovular nature of this room, this was actually one of the more difficult shots that I had to take, just based on the lens that I brought with me. So I actually got so frustrated that I took this particular shot on my iPhone. and included it in the book, just because I couldn't help resist just the beautiful glass work and the turquoise ceiling here. I really wanted to make sure I included it. And then last stop is the Niagara Frontier region. So Niagara Falls, the city of Buffalo, is located in this region. Buffalo Central Terminal, I'll talk about. The New York Central Railroad opened the Buffalo Central Terminal on June 22nd, 1929, just months before the Great Depression. Even though its goal was to replace several lesser stations scattered throughout the city, the 17-storied Art Deco terminal can handle about 200 trains and 10,000 passengers daily. This was the remains of one of the passenger concourses here. The last passenger train departed Buffalo Central Terminal in October 1979, just 50 years after it opened. And this is the remnants of the baggage claim building. Okay, just before I end the presentation, I just want to go over a couple of updates. Because this project, and sorry I went so fast, I just wanted to make sure I included just a lot of information regarding the photos that I took. But the places that I visited, they have a finite existence. So during the course of this book, a lot of the status of some of the places changed. So I talked about Bennett College dating back to 1890. It was an all-women's college. Well, the town of Millbrook demolished it in September of 2021 while the book was in publication. They're actually building a park in that spot. So a lot of the photos in this book sort of serve as the final official record of a lot of these historic places. Talked about Newton Falls Paper Company, the building that had all these industrial remnants left behind, all the blueprints that I showed you. Well, a friend of mine took these drone shots, and there's little to reason as to why it's being demolished right now. I heard that they're looking to build a Christmas tree farm nearby, but what happened to that, all those like blueprints and all those things that I found here, who knows. David Abercrombie's Elda estate, it is on the market now, but it actually suffered a fire in the spring of 2022 as a result of arson. And it actually took the fire department a long time to extinguish the blaze, just because they couldn't find an adequate working hydrant in the area. The Nevele Resort, this actually suffered a fire earlier this year as a result of arson. So we lost not the Nevele Tower, but this was one of the winter lodges that suffered the fire. But to end on a positive note, Skull Silo, which I mentioned earlier in the presentation, was part of the Greenpoint Terminal Market. They actually turned this structure into a drive-in movie theater. And you can actually see that street art is still intact on the side of the building. So that's why I found like this project to be really fulfilling in a way, because it sort of documents these relics of the past. And it's important to preserve the past so we know how to better behave in the future. So with that, I'm going to leave it open for questions. And yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. Katie, I'll leave it up to you.
Hi, thank you so much, John. That was
Yeah.
great. Uh, one question just to kind of take it off. I'm just wondering, like you said that you got started doing this kind of thing because of Kings Park, and obviously that was close to where you live, but
Yeah.
you've kept doing this and all over the state. I'm wondering what about it inspires you the most, like where you find the inspiration in this particular subject matter and what you hope your work will do for other people who see it.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a great question. I guess it goes back further than that. It goes back to when I was in high school. So 2005. I used to, if anyone is tuning in from Long Island, I'll just give a reference. Suffolk Community College, which is located in Brentwood, it's adjacent the Saginaw Coast Parkway from Pilgrim Psychiatric Center, which was I mentioned earlier, the largest hospital in the world. after doing these indoor track meets at Suffolk Community College, I would have to drive through the remnants of Pilgrim to find an exit for the Sad Coast Parkway to go home. And I did so after one of the track meets. And there were a lot of abandoned buildings at Pilgrim at that time. And I remember driving through at night and just being very fascinated at the size of the hospital and in awe of why there were so many buildings that were just closed and kind of left abandoned. And the answer to that question I wouldn't find until many years later when I started going to Kings Park. But I just remember that experience just being very real, and it really piqued my curiosity. And so that sort of started the interest, was the history of old state hospitals.
Yeah, and so for people who see your work and are like so moved by these abandoned places,
Yeah.
do you hope that it inspires them to get involved, or like what do you hope the effect is of your work?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that it interests people to sort of appreciate local local history, and just in like an appreciation for the past, because a lot of these places, they have a finite existence, and oftentimes we lose them due to unforeseen circumstances, such as like a fire, or a developer comes in and raises a building, and the historical significance is not often preserved, and it's not often told. So a particular part of history, will just go away before we actually, understand, the purpose of such a place.
Yeah, and there are a couple of comments and questions in the chat about safety and access,
Okay.
and obviously we want to encourage people to care about these places, but we don't want to encourage people to enter them
Sure.
unnecessarily, put themselves in danger, put the structures in danger. So can you talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I don't condone, anyone going, to a place like, Kings Park or any other abandoned place. There's a lot of risk factors involved, especially with contaminants such as like asbestos and lead paint. So if I plan on documenting a space, I plan on wearing a respirator. If I go by myself, I always let someone know where I'm going, in the event that something happens. And just over the 6 years that I've been doing this, I've had quite a few close calls and some minor injuries. So there is a risk there. And I'm sorry, what was the other part of the question, Katie?
I think you answered it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Do you often talk to the owners and get their permission to access the sites?
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes I do, and in fact, many of the sites that I visited are situated, in a park, so the public can go up and see a building, even though like the insides are sort of off limits. And then in cases such as the Saratoga County Homestead, like I mentioned, that's actually open for photography tours. So if you look on Facebook, you'll find the tours for that particular area. And also the Mid Orange Correctional Facility, which is in the book but not part of this presentation. That's actually opened up where you sign a waiver and you can actually go with your camera and you have access to the grounds, and it's sort of secured for most people. So I definitely recommend doing that, if anyone watching this presentation is a photographer.
Yeah, and I think in Buffalo, the Richardson Olmsted complex, part of that is still very much vacant, and they do
Yeah.
photography tours there as well.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah, that's open to the public. Part of that facility is, like you said, like a hotel. And just kind of going back to the preservation part of it, um, in the lower levels of the hotel, they actually have a nice museum, sort of showing what that hospital was like back when it was active. With a lot of historical photos. They just did a lot of care into the museum, so you actually know the purpose it served prior to it being a hotel. And that's what I hope to see for a lot of these places that we haven't lost already.
yeah. Someone was asking about the aerial shots. Did you use a drone for those?
I did, yeah. So I use a DJI Mavic 2. I actually lost my first one on the mountainside somewhere up in northeastern Vermont. It blew away in a windstorm. So I was photographing an old radar base up there. So I actually have the GPS coordinates to it. I just physically can't get to it. So I am on my second drone, but it is very helpful in sort of taking some exterior shots.
Yeah, for sure. And I love that you ended with positive note. So seeing
Yeah.
one of these sites kind of be reused. Do you have any other examples of adaptive reuse successes on any of these sites that you've photographed? I know we could give you like a million great adaptive reuse stories, but was there any in particular that you were photographing that you've seen kind of come around in the last couple years?
Yeah, well, I guess I'll give two. So one is the Mahaskell Powerhouse, which actually Preserve New York State had a hand in, and maybe Katie you can elaborate on that a little more. But that house was instituted into the Chuctanunda Creek rail trail. So at different parts of the creek in Amsterdam, there are these sort of plaques that sort of talk about the history of the industrial um, nature of Amsterdam and the purposes that the river served as part of Mohawk County. So that's really interesting to see, and you can actually walk around parts of the powerhouse as well. And I think at least during the time that I photographed it, there were parts secure where you could actually walk, in and around the powerhouse. And then the second part is with Kings Park. I didn't mention this during the presentation, but the Office of Parks and Rec actually proposed a master plan of what they want to do with Nissaquag River State Park, which is where the hospital is located. And they actually plan on demolishing a lot of the buildings, unfortunately, but they do want to preserve some of them and institute a living museum, sort of showing, the over century old history of the hospital in different forms. So that is a plan that they do intend on doing. In terms of when that's going to take effect, I don't know, but I was happy to hear that.
Yeah, that's great. And are you working with, I know there's a pretty strong grassroots contingent out at Kings Park who have been advocating for that site. Are you involved with them at all?
I'm not involved with them directly. I do know many of them that are working on the board. For me, like now, I don't go to Kings Park as much, except if I'm testing a piece of new camera equipment or I want to fly my drone around. But I do. I have been making just like short little videos on some of the places that I visited. So a lot of the places that I visited for this book, I'm actually revisiting, but I'm doing more of like a video aspect to it. So, I started with doing different buildings at Kings Park for that.
Cool. Caitlin in the Q&A asks, can you talk about your process for finding and scouting vacant sites?
Yeah, great question. So it's just a lot of online research. So for instance, like if you type in abandoned Catskills in Google, you'll see a lot of like old resorts. You'll find the Catskill Game Farm. In fact, it's kind of funny how I got the idea to do this book. I had mentioned that I wanted to venture, more and more off Long Island and sort of travel to different spots. In order to make my traveling a little more efficient, I was doing research and I was documenting um, some of the spots that I found on an Excel sheet, and I was doing it like by county, by region, just to, when I was planning my trips, how to make it cost effective. And I started seeing just a lot of similarities in terms of the ruins there. So I was just finding a lot of old resorts in the Catskills, and then going up to the Finger Lakes, I was seeing just a lot of like old, like, railroad remnants there. So yeah, and just also just driving around. Wherever you're located, sometimes you'll see an old building sort of kind of left to its own devices, and you don't really know the story behind it, but I think it sort of piques the human curiosity of like what's inside there, like what purpose did this building serve at one point during time. So
Yeah, and related to the hospitals, someone
yeah.
asked, did you photograph Utica and Willard hospitals? They make an important and interesting juxtaposition of pioneering approaches to mental health treatment. And then another comment or question, who typically owns the vacant hospitals and sanatoria around the state, if you happen to know?
Okay, yeah. So Utica and Willard. I've been to Old Main in Utica. I do have a photograph from the outside. I know like that building is off limits. I think they have like a lot of medical store or sorry, medical record storage there. I have been to Willard. I have photographed it. It was after the book was in production, so it's not included. But I have been there. It's a beautiful campus, and I do hope they preserve some of those buildings there. And then in terms of who owns um, the hospitals and sanatoriums, it really depends on a case by case basis of the actual location. So just using Kings Park as an example, that's under the ownership of the New York State Office of Parks and Rec. And then various other hospital sanatoriums. Sometimes it's the county. So Jane and Adam Memorial Hospital, that's actually state owned. Saratoga County Homestead, like I mentioned, that's private ownership. So that's why it's you can actually do photo tours there. It really depends on a case by case basis. Mostly with hospitals, it's more of a state and county ownership.
Yeah, and that's also true with Willard. Another of
Yeah.
our seven to saves. I was dropping so many links in the chat, like, and this was a seven to save, and this was a seven to save. There are so many of these sites that are just like so amazing, and we want to see them saved, but people haven't quite figured out how to do that. And there's a
Yeah.
comment about being proactive with adaptive reuse of buildings in New York, and I think that's always a struggle based on what can the building do? Where's the funding? What is the new use? Who is the owner? But do you have any thoughts about that, about how people can help with adaptive reuse of these kinds of sites?
Yeah, I mean, certainly donate to your local historical societies. Preserve New York State does a lot of grant programs, which actually save a lot of these buildings because the longer they're left standing, um, the more susceptible they are to natural and physical decay as a result of vandalism. So. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, it
absolutely.
is important to to save these. Like like I said, like the in a lot of cases, like their future is sort of like unforeseen, and many developers or many owners rather of some of these places, like it's from a financial aspect, it's cheaper to leave them standing than it is to take them down, just because of all the risks, the cost of demolition, abating a place, such as Kings Park, where it's just years of asbestos and lead paint built up, um, and then that alone leaves them susceptible to decay and vandalism.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're just about at time. Before we close it out, I'm wondering, of all of these places that you visited and photographed, do you have a favorite?
Oh man, yeah, I mean, I guess I could go region by region, but um, Kings Park certainly has a special place in my heart just because it's kind of where I got started doing this type of photography. But my favorite spot would probably be, at least for this book project, Seaview Hospital in Staten Island. Not just because of the like the beautiful photography that you can get from there, but just of the rich history in terms of the health field. How far back in time it goes to the turn of the century when we were still trying to find a cure for tuberculosis, which was, essentially like the COVID before COVID, and all the pioneering research that was done at that hospital. So, I mean, the history there is so rich, and I would love to see, a museum sort of preserving that part of medical history there. Um, yeah, so that's probably my favorite spot that I visited.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And just to relate it, so there's also a smallpox hospital, a ruin on Roosevelt Island,
Yes.
similar.
Yeah.
And there is a very active friends group on that site. And they are planning to turn it into a stabilized ruin that is a memorial to COVID, basically, like
Oh
talking
wow.
about like health and all of those kinds of things. So drop that link in the chat. But we always love seeing people find new, interesting ways of, if a site can't be, totally restored, if it's fallen into too much of a disrepair, perhaps the ruins can be stabilized. Like there are all sorts of answers to these questions. We just want to, keep that history alive.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, with that, I think we are about at time. So, John, thank you so much for sharing your work with us. If you all would like to learn more, you can find his website, buy the book, and find him on Instagram as well. I hope you all will tune in for another author talk at some point with us. We like to host these pretty regularly. And if there's anything that you think that we should be focusing on, you just let me know and we'll see what we can do. But thank you all so much for tuning in, and I hope you all have a great afternoon.